Good morning, everyone. This is Laura Tibbetts in the system office. I'm showing that we have our committee present. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Chair Flores to start the meeting.
Good morning and welcome to the Telephonic Rules and Regulations Committee meeting for November 9, 2022. I am Regent Don Flores, chair of this committee. The time is 11:01 a.m. Central Standard Time. Notice of this meeting was provided to the Secretary of State as required by Texas Open Meetings Act, Government Code, Chapter 551. Please note that the audio of this meeting is being broadcast live. Before we take a roll call, I would like to remind everyone to please mute their phone unless you need to speak. Laura, let's begin the roll call with committee members and any other regents.
Okay, thank you. I'll start with you, Chair Flores.
Present.
Regent Foskey.
Present.
Regent Tinsley.
Here.
And do we have any other regents on the call this morning? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. May we have a roll call for system office and component representatives?
Sure, I'll start with Chancellor McCall.
Here.
Nellie Herrera. Here. Daniel Harper.
Here.
Sandy Poole. Here. Derek Alexander.
Here.
John Hayek.
Here.
Carol Fox.
Here.
Sean Cunningham.
Here.
May Gardner. Here. Marjorie Flanagan.
Here.
And do we have any other system staff on the call? Thank you. Moving down to our schools, let's start with Lamar University.
Jaime Taylor here,
Mark Robinson.
and that's it from Lamar University.
Great, thank you. Sam Houston.
Elisa White.
And Amanda Withers.
Thank you. Saul Ross.
Good morning, this is Carlos Hernandez.
Bonnie Albright.
Bernie Cantons.
Thank you. Moving down to Texas State University.
Kelly Danfus,
Eric Algo and Lisa Lloyd.
And Cynthia Hernandez.
And I think, is that Dr. Bourgeois as well?
Yes.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you. LIT.
Ed Valentine.
Rudy Gonzalez.
Angela Hill.
Tasha Morales.
Great, thank you. Lamar State College Orange.
Mary Wicklund, Wendy Elmore, and Tom Johnson.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. And Lamar State College Port Arthur.
Eddie Renard and Mary Wickland.
Thank you. Did I miss anyone on roll call? Great, thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'd like to note that Nellie Herrera briefed me on the agenda items prior to this meeting. At this time, I ask that she present the Rules and Regulations Committee agenda items.
Thank you, Chairman Flores. Today, we'll be discussing changes to 6 system rules. The first proposed change is located at page RR1, or if you're following along in the board book, it's at page 439. The proposed change is Chapter 3, paragraph 1.4. We're adding a new section relating to statutory tuition. This proposed change is submitted by Daniel Harper, the Vice Chancellor and Chief Financial Officer. Daniel, would you like to speak to this item?
Thank you, Nellie. So state law allows the Board of Regents to waive statutory tuition for dual credit students. And at the Finance and Audit meeting yesterday, the committee voted to approve moving from statutory tuition to designated tuition for the dual credit. And this would put this in Regent rule. The benefit to the institutions by charging it under the designated tuition statute versus the statutory tuition statute is by design. The legislature's provided more flexibility for the use of designated tuition dollars. So no impact to the students, but provides more flexibility to the institutions as they manage their limited resources.
Thank you, Daniel. Chairman Flores, if there are no questions for Mr. Harper, I'll move on to the next item.
Regents, do you have any questions regarding this item? Nellie, please proceed to the next item.
Thank you. The second item is located on page RR2 or in Board Book 440. The proposed change is to Chapter 3, Paragraph 1.5, and relates to the Public Art Program. Now, as we know, the Board of Regents has directed, in accordance with the Texas Government Code, that 1% of each new major construction project with a total project cost of $1 million or more be allocated for the acquisition of works of public art. The revision to the rule clarifies several things. It clarifies the construction projects subject to the 1% rule. It clarifies the definition of public art. It clarifies certain duties of the Director of Public Art, and it also attempts to clarify the approval process for acquiring public art. Chairman Flores, since the distribution of these proposed changes, there has been some interest expressed to add additional clarifying language to the approval process in section 1.528.
Regent Tinsley, Regent Foskey, do either of you wish to add any clarifying language to the approval process language in section 1.528?
Chair Flores,
Regent Foskey,
Chair Flores, I propose adding clarifying language to the approval process language in section 1.528. I move that we add the following sentences to the beginning of this section 1.528. A committee on public art will be created and promulgated its operating procedures establishing the criteria for membership, duties, and terms of each committee member. A component president shall select and/or approve a majority percentage of the committee members.
there is a motion by Regent Foskey. Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any objections to the motion? There being no objections, the motion passes. Nellie, please proceed to the next item.
Thank you. The third proposed change to our system rules is located on page RR5 or in Board Book 443, and the change is to Chapter 3, Paragraph 10.5, relating to contracts, purchases, and agreements. The proposal is submitted by Vice Chancellor Harper. Daniel, would you like to speak to this item?
Yes, ma'am. So this, in our rules, we have the minimum requirements for the explanation and the motion regarding contracts. And there's a provision there that specifically states just to the form 1295. And we're proposing that we amend that statement to comply with all the vendor selection process, TSUS rules, and the contract management handbook.
Thank you. Chairman Flores, if there are no questions for Mr. Harper, I'll move on to the next item.
Regents, are there any questions regarding this item? Nellie, please proceed to the next item.
Yes, sir. The fourth proposed change is located on page RR6 or in Board Book 444. The change is to Chapter 5, Paragraph 2.7. The revision aligns the language regarding payroll deductions with the language in the Texas Administrative Code. This proposal also comes to us by Vice Chancellor Harper. And so Daniel, would you like to elaborate on this one?
Thank you. Yeah, so as Nellie said, we're just copying the language that's in Texas Code, so there's not any question of what an institution can and cannot do. And an example of a payroll deduction that would apply to this would be if an institution charged parking, that an employee would have the ability to have their parking fee out of their paycheck versus a separate transaction.
Thanks, Daniel. Chairman Flores, if there are no questions for Vice Chancellor Harper, I'll move on to the fifth item.
Regents, are there any questions regarding this item? Nellie, please proceed to the next item, please.
So the fifth proposed change is located on page RR7 or in Board Book 445. The proposed change is to Chapter 6, Paragraph 5.9, relating to student conduct and discipline. The revision would eliminate the mandatory sanction of expulsion for a second drug-related infraction. Now, this proposal is submitted by Texas State. President Danfus, would you or a member of your team like to speak to this item?
Thank you, Nellie. I'm happy to do so. This issue first was discussed by the Vice Presidents for Student Affairs of the component institutions in the Board of Regents meeting in Beaumont, and then the proposed language was discussed by the BPSAs at the Board of Regents meeting in Austin, and it was unanimously supported by the BPSAs at the component institutions to bring this recommendation forward. It's a collective consensus of all the components of the system, and it allows each component institution the discretion to determine appropriate sanctions based on mitigating and aggravating factors specific to their communities.
Thank you, President Danfus. Chairman Flores, if there are no questions for President Danfus, I will move on to the last item.
Regents, are there any questions regarding this item? Nellie, please proceed to the last item.
Yes, sir. The last proposed change is located on page RR8 or in Board Book 446. The proposed change is to Chapter 8, Paragraph 3.1, and it relates to the Ethics Commission Financial Disclosure Statement. Now, this revision to the rule will require regents, presidents, and the chancellor to notify the vice chancellor and the general counsel when they have filed their financial disclosure statements with the Ethics Commission. From time to time, our components are asked by accrediting agencies to provide this type of information. This will ensure that we have the necessary information in hand when it is requested by the accrediting agencies. And Chairman Flores, unless there are any questions to this last item, this concludes my presentation this morning.
Thank you, Nellie. Regent Foskey, are there any items that you would like to? Well, I just jumped across here. Are there any questions regarding this last item? Hearing none. Thank you, Nellie. Regent Foskey, are there any items that you would like to move off the consent agenda for consideration by the full board?
No.
Regent Tinsley, are there any items that you would like to move off the consent agenda for the consideration of the full board?
No, sir.
Thank you. As no one is requesting we move any item off the consent agenda, Regent Foskey and Regent Tinsley, I move that we recommend board approval for the proposed changes to the system rules of the consent agenda. Regent Foskey, do you agree?
Yes, sir.
Regent Tinsley, do you agree?
Agreed.
Thank you, Regent Foskey and Regent Tinsley, for your responses. In light of those responses, the proposed changes to the system's rules will remain on the consent agenda for the committee's recommendation for approval. As there are no further items to consider, this concludes the business of the Rules and Regulations Committee and concludes today's telephonic committee meeting. Thanks to everyone for calling in and taking part. And for the record, the time is 11:14 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.